Hello, welcome back. Today we'll get started with adding a bit more details to the wings, and to do that it will be the landing gear trap that we're going to be modeling. So I'll duplicate this face quickly, remove it from the shrink wrap group, and we're going to kind of trace our trap, and then we will rotate it so that it fits onto the wing. So I'll just place those two vertices here, then start extruding them and adding loop cuts to kind of trace all the corners. So at this point you should be pretty used to doing this, and I'm sure you're having no trouble doing it, as it's a very simple piece. Just gotta make sure to capture all the corners. So I'll just add a few loops to tighten the corners and then fill this area. Perfect. Now I'll select those three faces and I will bevel this just to kind of get this corner very sharp. And then setting my pivot to around here, because this is where the pivot point would be. On the real one, I'll just move it up so it touches the bottom of the wing. And then set my pivot here, and then I will rotate it on the y-axis. So I'll just make sure it's just above the surface. The closer you get to the surface, the cleaner, the more accurate the projection will be. So in our case here, we'll need to create this hole. So I'll just add a loop here to kind of isolate this portion. Then I will delete those two faces. Then add a loop right in line with this vertex at the corner. I just want to recreate the shape of the trap here. Here I'll delete this face, and then we can slide that vertex down. Then we can delete this one. And to be honest, in retrospect, the better technique would just have been to kind of delete most of the faces in the area, then reassign the trap to the vertex group that is shrink wrapped, and then refill the area around, instead of just retracing the trap underneath the wing after having kind of created it. Right now we're kind of doing double the amount of work that we could have done. So here I'm just using the knife tool. Okay, so now I'm going to delete the trap over here and delete those two faces. And then selecting all of those, I'm going to flatten them on the y-axis. Now here, let's add this loop over here, just to kind of tighten that corner. And now we should kind of close this gap. So I'll connect those two vertices. I'll just make sure that is the right shape. And this would have been another advantage of just, yes, tracing it on inside view, but then after rotating it, applying the shrink wrap for those vertices, and then just completing the shape. So here I'll make some room just for us to be able to kind of create a face that will loop around this part. So I'll create this face and then create this big triangle. Then delete this face to add a loop right here that you can then merge at last. And then create a new quad here. And then slide it further, just to make it easier to create the loop around. Then delete this edge, add a loop, extrude. Actually, we're gonna connect those two before, and then fill in that area. Awesome. We now have a loop that runs all around our trap. Now I'll face up this area. Doesn't really matter how, as long as it's relatively clean topology. Here I'll select all of the vertices around, then we'll extrude them and then scale them down just a tad. Or we can just add a loop in the middle here instead. Might be a better solution. And I will bevel this vertex. And then this vertex as well, using Shift Ctrl B and not just Ctrl B. So Shift Ctrl B. Then slide that vertex to merge it. Over here, just make sure you have auto merge vertices turned on. Now this corner is sharp enough already. Same for here, although this one will be in need of tightening. So Ctrl Shift B, then merge. Okay, now we can select all of those verts, extrude them, scale them down just a bit. And now we have the trap and the cutout for our landing gear. We just need to make the trap, and to do that I'll duplicate this loop, scale it, separate, and then we'll need to create new faces. So I'll extrude everything, scale it down, just already have this protective loop all around. Recalculate the normals and then start filling up the area, just like that. So here it might be better to start with these. Just slide them to make a bit of distance. Then add one loop here, a second one, just to match the number of vertices around. Fill in that area. Now the number of loops you may have might be different, but just make sure that the topology is relatively clean. It doesn't really matter that much because we are wrapped onto the base mesh. So here I'm feeling a little bit lazy. I'm just going to make a triangle. Okay, good. Pretty good start. Now I'll move this aside just to see a bit more clearly what's happening. And here is when I realized that I actually always had the top view all along as my bottom blueprint. But you shouldn't have this problem just because I told you in the first episode to not forget to replace it. So rookie mistake on my side, but since we don't rely too much on blueprints, we were okay and we were able to continue without having to use it. So I'll duplicate this single vertex. Then I'll move it over here and I'll just trace the rest of the landing gear trap. Now here, I still think it might be a better solution to just knife tool this area, this shape directly underneath the wing. But I'm gonna try this method of creating the outline first, then bringing it over here. But sometimes you don't know, you miss a bit of information, and this is what happens. You need to change stuff in the non-optimal way. So here I'll just slide it down to make some room and see better what's happening. Then I'll select those 4 faces, remove them, and we can merge that vertex. Same for this one. Then I'll delete those 2 edges to make some space for our new landing gear trap. Same for this, just to get us some space, enough to play with. Now here, I'll duplicate our shrink wrap modifier and apply one of them, just to reproject it. Actually, I forgot to assign it to the vertex group. So once that is done, I will duplicate the shrink wrap, apply 1 copy. That way it's wrapped onto the wing and the vertices are in a closer position to what their kind of final position will be. So here I'll move it really close and then merge at last if needed. So here I'm extruding this edge and doing the same for this one, just to get this protective loop running around. Here we may need to delete those 2. Then extrude this edge, create this new face. Make sure to not select the vertices on top of the wing, only the ones at the bottom. Dissolve this one, just to be able to create this face quickly. Add a loop to tighten that area. Actually, bevel might be a better solution. So I'll select all of them. And then I will bevel them manually using Ctrl B. And this will allow us to do just like last time and merge them at last. Here I'll increase the loop amount and then merge at center. I'm going to add it to my quick favorite, that way it's quicker. Save preference. And then Q, merge at center. Select all 3 at center. And we will repeat this process for all of them. Okay, now this edge can be deleted. And now here I'll select the whole loop, so both traps, and then I'll extrude it and then scale using Alt S. Actually, Alt S wasn't the best option in this case, so I'll just select this portion here, extrude it, scale it using S. Here. And we couldn't do it one shot simply because some parts would have kind of scaled in the wrong direction. So I'm going to do it in 2 sections. So selecting those, I'll just move it over here to continue this loop. And I'll just need to merge it, not merge it, but move it over here. Then move those here and create this new face. Here I will bevel them, and then we'll need to merge all of those at center. Here we can create this new face, then slide that back just to get some room. Connect those two together, add loop cut running here, fill in that area. And now we just need to connect everything together in a relatively clean way. Now don't worry too much about glitches at this point. When you fill in the area, if there are still glitches, then yes, you need to fix them. But while facing it, you don't need to worry about it too much. Here it's just going to need one more loop or maybe creases. So here I'm just trying this setup of adding a loop to create a quad instead of a triangle. And now let's try to resolve those glitches and see how we can fix them. Okay, so sliding them outward doesn't seem to fix the issue. And let's see in close-up what is happening. So yeah, if we get rid of one of the pair of edges, vertices, sorry, then we can just slide them further away and it should solve the issue. So just slide vertices around or maybe dissolve the center ones and you should be fine. Here though we'll need to bevel them, just like we did for the rest, and don't forget to merge at center to avoid any end-on. Here we'll just need to edit this position. here we'll select those parts, duplicate, separate selection, and then model the trap. So new face here, that's probably the easy one. Then press F, and this one is pretty much filled by itself. We'll just need to be careful. Here we may need to add one loop. Then add a loop here. Select this small edge. Awesome. Add loop vertically. Create these new faces. And we're good to go. Maybe not the cleanest fill I've done, but if it does the job, that's all that matters. Here, let's recalculate normals and check keep sharp on your weighted normals modifier. Let's do the same for this one, just to not forget. Great. The tricky part for this episode is done now. Okay, now for the kind of relaxing part, because it's really simple, but we have a lot of panels to do. I'll select those two parts of the fuselage, go in local view with them, and don't forget to select this image before going into local view, that way you don't forget it. And I'll just reduce the opacity. And here we may need to relocate our panel gap slightly. So I'll just select those, move them around, just so they're at the end of this trap. So here I'll select the end vertices, and let's just move them on the y-axis, not even sliding them. Make sure they're flat. And make sure these are flat as well. Great. Okay, now let's create those little panels and little details underneath. And you will see this is really where it pays off to have used this technique and just followed this series, I guess. Now here I'll just slide loops all over the place, kind of, just to trace the outline of every little trap. So add a loop here, just make sure they're relatively evenly spaced, or at least at the right place. Then I'll select the faces and then inset them. Now I'm not going to tighten the corners specifically yet. I'm going to kind of cut out all the panels before, and you will see why a bit later on. So I'll slide that one here to not add any loops for no reason. So here I'll just space them out a bit more, make them a bit cleaner. Here add a loop here and there. And these, maybe we can just slide those two over here and do the same for those two as well. So whenever you can, try to save on geometry, but other than that, you can see that I'm not worrying too much about the poly count of this model. So I'll just inset, then delete those faces, inset, press B, and delete that face. Now we can select all of those bottom faces, then separate them, just because they're part of another panel. So I'm going to add a loop here and do the same exact process that we did just before. So for me, this part is really fun and kind of relaxing. You don't have to think too much about them because they're really simple and really easy to make. Here I will add one loop here, straighten it, add it here, add one loop here, then delete. Actually, let's select those, inset them, and then we will select the center faces and then inset them. Because if we tried to inset them all at once, it would have made one trap instead of 3 like we want. Inset, actually, let's slide that a bit closer just to be a bit more accurate. And then delete. Let's make sure that our edges are straight. This is quite important, you don't want wobbly panels. Okay, awesome. So now we can start tightening the corners. So I'll delete the face right next to this edge, well, to this loop that was kind of helping with the corners here. So whenever I have loops that I can move around, I will move them around to tighten the corners. And when I don't, I will delete the face next to our protective loop and add kind of 2 triangles just to tighten the corners. So in this case, we can use this at the bottom, these as well. Let's just move them really close to get something very sharp. Here I'll delete this face, like I said, then create this triangle and then refill the area. That way we can save a bit of polygons by not running a whole loop around the side of the plane when we don't need any more geometry there. Here we can add a loop because it's tightening both corners at the same time, so I'm not mad about doing that. Here, let's add another one. And we can merge those maybe, or just slide them around. This loop is not long, so it's not going to cost us too many faces. Here, delete this, slide that closer, add a loop, create this quad and a triangle. Now you can imagine the look of this panel if we were not using a shrink wrap. Like all these sides of the plane would be super bumpy, super wobbly because we're adding so many loops. And now we don't have to care about any of that, and we can add as much details as we want, and we can even tweak the shape if needed. Here, let's tighten that. Use the loops we have when we can. Delete this face. Loop at the top, loop at the bottom, triangle, quad, triangle. Great. So you always want to tighten your corners. You can see the difference here between circular ones and straight ones. Here I'll just make sure that my blueprints is at the center. If it's not for you too, you can just adjust that really easily because we have a base mesh underneath. So even if this face is lightly curved, it doesn't matter because it's projected onto something that has a perfect surface. Great. Now this kind of detail is so important just for the general look of any model. It will really elevate the quality, and it will also kind of allow more use cases for your model. For example, if we only do it for very long distance shots, we can only have so many ways of presenting this model. But when we add a lot of details, we can now unlock close-up shots, which are super interesting and kind of really show the quality of a model. So for me, details are usually the most important part of a model. And now for this part, guess what? It's exactly the same thing as for the bottom. So whenever you have loops, you can reuse them. If not, add them and try to keep their number to something reasonable and their length to the minimum. So here, triangle, quad, triangle, just like usual, slide that one really close. And let's do the same for this at the bottom. Perfect. Now for these, move them closer. Add 2 loops. And now I should delete those. And then delete this face and do a triangle. Much better. Here we need one more loop. And I guess we could have just added one without the need for creating a triangle. But I just thought, why not? Now here I'll make sure that this side is straight. So set my pivot to active element, then SX0. Same for this side. Now this would have been better to do it beforehand, before creating the traps and the panel gaps. But of course you can't predict everything. And if this was your case as well, that you had this problem, that was how to fix it. Now these are small little traps, and what we're going to do is delete that face on the side just to limit the range of our loops. And then we will add one at the bottom as well. Just slide those over to make some space. Now I'll delete those 4 faces, and I will keep the one that's kind of separating them. Here, let's make sure that's straight. Just wanted to check before. Okay, good. So this, I'm going to duplicate it, scale it down, and now I'm going to duplicate my shrink wrap modifier because you could see there was kind of an offset, and that was because our geometry in edit mode was kind of not at the right place. So I'll just flatten that on all sides just to give me a nice little rectangle. Then we'll move it over here, set my pivot to bounding box, scale it down just to kind of create, actually, let's bevel it. And set the number of segment to 3 maybe. Then inset that face. And now you can delete this one. Then add a loop on each corner, just like that. And scale it up. Now, once it's scaled and put into position, we're going to duplicate it, place it right below, then duplicate them once again. Here you can see we'll need to move them down just to get closer to their actual position, then rotate them on the y-axis. Awesome, that way they're not warped. And now we just need to connect them together, pretty easy. Then select all of those, extrude on the x-axis until they clip. Here, let's add one loop here, one loop there, create this quad, one loop, and let's just try this. Here, same principle. Connect those two together. We can afford a loop there. We can afford another one here, just to get us all quads everywhere, actually. All quads except this triangle. Another triangle here, and then one quad to complete. Refilling this area. Here, I'll just make sure that it's straight on the y-axis. Perfect, let's do this for that loop. Awesome. I'm just filling everything. You can add loops if you need. I'm trying to get something with quads, but if not, it's not a big deal. We can deal with those. Create a face, create a loop here, connect those, another loop at the bottom. Actually, yeah, we can't really avoid that one. So create this face, loop, face, 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 loop, and press F, F again, and slide that to the center to create just a little bit of a prettier topology. Now here it's very dense, and I'm not sure I like that. So I'm going to merge some vertices. It's a bit better. Here I'll just continue to merge vertices together just to reduce the amount of loops we'll need to finish filling that area. So here, let's put that to the side just to make it a bit straighter. Slide that over here, slide those closer. Now for this we can merge. And this we can merge over here as well. And we can do that for this one. So we went from maybe 5 to 1 loop needed. Now what we can do here, just to make everything a bit more pretty, select everything here, space them, select that loop, space them. I'm going to add that to quick favorite, that way I can do it quicker. So select a loop, space, loop, space. Here we need to select them like that. Awesome, much cleaner, much better. Here we can even slide that up just to get perfectly even geometry density. Alright, that will be pretty much that for this episode. And I'll see you in the next one, where we will continue this process. And actually, let's just move those around just before we leave. So I'm just adding a loop and then sliding that back. Perfect. Alright, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye.